The storm that swept through the lands of Florida that March dawn could not compare to the one devastating Eduardo Williamson's heart. Sitting in his leather armchair in the ranch library, he watched raindrops sliding down the glass windows while the wind swayed the oak branches that protected the main house. At 42, Eduardo was the richest man in the region, owner of an agricultural empire that stretched across thousands of acres. But that morning, like all others in the past 7 years, he felt like the poorest man in the world. His blue eyes, which once shone with the joy of one who loved and was loved, now reflected only the coldness of someone who had given up feeling. His dark brown hair, always impeccably styled, was beginning to show silver strands at the temples, marks of time that passed without him truly living. Tall and imposing at 6'3", Eduardo walked through the ranch like a ghost of himself, following protocols, signing contracts, but never allowing true life to touch his armored soul. The death of Clara, his wife, had been the milestone that divided his existence into two parts. Before and after the tragedy that claimed not only the life of the woman he loved, but also any vestige of hope he still kept in his chest. The car accident that took her on a rainy night like this one had transformed Eduardo into a working machine, a task executor who kept the empire running, but had completely forgotten how to live. The front doorbell rang, cutting through the heavy silence of the morning. Mrs. Margaret, the housekeeper who had been caring for the house for more than 20 years, crossed the hallway with hurried steps. Eduardo barely looked up from the financial report he was pretending to read when he heard voices at the entrance. A female voice, soft but determined, was speaking respectfully with Margaret. "Good morning, Mrs. Margaret. I'm Lucy Santos. I came for the housemaid position." Eduardo frowned. He didn't remember authorizing any hiring, but Margaret had been insisting for months that they needed additional help in the main house. Maybe he had absent-mindedly agreed in some conversation he hadn't paid attention to. "Of course, dear. And this young man here must be your son." "Yes, ma'am. This is Kyle, my son." The boy's voice was clear and polite. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Margaret." Eduardo got up from his chair, moved by a curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time. He walked to the window that overlooked the entrance courtyard and observed the scene. A young woman, appearing to be around 20, was standing next to two simple but well-maintained suitcases. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a discreet bun, and even from a distance, Eduardo could notice there was something special about her bearing, a natural dignity that couldn't be bought with money. Beside her, a thin but well-groomed boy of about 13 observed everything around with curious and intelligent eyes. His clothes were simple but impeccably clean and pressed. There was something in the way he carried himself, upright and respectful, that caught Eduardo's attention. Lucy Santos had soft green eyes, like eucalyptus leaves after rain, and fair skin that contrasted with the rusticity of the rural environment. Her hands, though delicate, showed calluses from honest work, and the way she held her purse strap, firm but without ostentation, revealed a woman accustomed to fighting for life with her own strength. "Come, I'll show you where you'll be staying," said Margaret, leading them to the back of the property where the staff quarters were located. Eduardo continued watching until they disappeared from sight. Something about that encounter stirred him in a way he couldn't explain. Maybe it was the boy's naturalness or the mother's dignified posture in the face of a situation many would consider humiliating. Whatever it was, for the first time in years, Eduardo felt a pang of curiosity about other people. During lunch, served punctually at 12:30 as always, Eduardo noticed that the movement in the kitchen was different. There was a new, lighter energy. Through the dining room window, he saw Lucy working in the garden, pruning the rose bushes with care and precision. Her movements were fluid, almost dance-like, and he caught himself watching longer than would be appropriate. Kyle appeared in the late afternoon when Eduardo was taking his routine walk through the stables. The boy was sitting under a mango tree, reading a thick book that seemed disproportionate for his age. "Good afternoon, Mr. Williamson," said Kyle, standing up respectfully when he saw Eduardo approaching. "Good afternoon," Eduardo replied, stopping in front of the boy. "What are you reading?" Kyle showed the book cover, a bit shyly. "To Kill a Mockingbird," by Harper Lee. It's for a school project. Eduardo raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect to find a boy Kyle's age reading Harper Lee on a ranch in rural Florida. "And what do you think of it?" "I confess it's difficult, sir, but it's fascinating how Harper Lee makes us understand different perspectives on justice and prejudice. Sometimes I think Atticus was right to defend Tom Robinson. Other times I wonder if he could have done more." Eduardo was surprised by the maturity of the response. There was something special about this boy, a thirst for knowledge that shone in his brown eyes, a natural intelligence that transcended the limitations of his humble origin. "Do you like studying?" Kyle's eyes lit up. "Very much, sir. I study at a school in Tampa. I got a merit scholarship. I wake up at 5 in the morning to catch the bus, but it's worth every minute. I want to be a lawyer when I grow up, to help people like my mother, who have always been honest but never had the same opportunities." Eduardo felt something move in his chest, an emotion he had buried so deep he almost forgot how it felt. It was admiration, genuine admiration for a boy who, at 13, already showed more determination and character than many men Eduardo knew. "Your mother must be very proud of you." "She's everything to me, sir. We work together so I can study. One day I'll repay everything she's done for me." While Kyle spoke, Eduardo observed the purity of his intentions, the way his eyes shone when talking about his mother and studies. It had been so long since he had seen true hope in someone's eyes that it left him disarmed. "Can I ask you a question, Mr. Williamson?" "You can." "Why do you always seem sad?" The question hit Eduardo like a punch to the stomach. Children had this devastating ability to go straight to the point, without detours or diplomacy. He remained silent for a few seconds, fighting the urge to simply leave. "Sometimes life takes away important things from us, Kyle, and when that happens, it becomes difficult to remember how to smile." Kyle nodded seriously, as if he deeply understood what Eduardo was saying. "My mother always says that plants need rain to grow, that without the water from storms, they don't become strong. Maybe sadness is like rain, bad when it's happening, but necessary for something new to be born." Eduardo looked at the boy with a mixture of surprise and respect. There was a wisdom in those words that many adults would never achieve. "You're a very special boy, Kyle." "Thank you, sir. Can I go back to my reading now? I have a test tomorrow." Eduardo nodded and walked away, but couldn't stop thinking about the conversation for the rest of the day. That night, sitting again in his library, he looked out the window and saw the light on in the small room where Lucy and Kyle were staying. He could imagine the mother helping her son with his studies, the two sharing dreams and plans for the future. For the first time in 7 years, Eduardo Williamson fell asleep thinking about other people besides himself. Have you ever met someone who changed your perspective on life with just a few words? Leave your like and comment which city you're following this story from. Your participation means a lot to us. The days that followed brought a subtle but perceptible change to the ranch's rhythm. Eduardo began to notice details that previously went unnoticed. The way Lucy folded the bed linens with almost artistic precision. The way she cared for the plants with a delicacy that made the flowers seem to respond to her touch, and mainly how she treated everyone on the ranch with the same respect, regardless of hierarchy. Lucy Santos had grown up in a family of rural workers in Clearwater. Daughter of a seamstress and a construction worker who died when she was only 17, she learned early that dignity didn't come from where you were born, but from how you chose to live. At 19, she discovered she was pregnant with Kyle. The boy's father, a young man from the city who had promised her the world, disappeared as soon as he learned about the pregnancy, leaving her alone to face the world. But Lucy didn't let herself break. She worked in family homes, cleaned offices during the early hours, sold sweets on the streets, everything to ensure Kyle had not only what was necessary to survive, but also the opportunity to dream big. Every penny saved, every sacrifice made, had a purpose: to give her son the chances she never had. Her green eyes, inherited from her Portuguese grandmother, carried stories of poorly slept nights, of meals divided so her son could eat better, of forced smiles when exhaustion weighed on her shoulders, but they also held a silent strength, a determination that transformed every obstacle into a step to climb higher. Eduardo observed all this from afar, like a spectator trying to decipher a play he didn't completely understand. There was something in the way Lucy moved through the house that intrigued him. She didn't work just to fulfill obligations, but put genuine care into each task, as if she were caring for something that belonged to her. One Thursday morning, Eduardo came down for coffee earlier than usual and found Lucy in the kitchen, preparing homemade bread. The aroma that filled the environment was so welcoming that he stopped at the door, just watching. She was humming softly while working, a gentle melody he didn't recognize, but that somehow calmed him. "Good morning, Mr. Williamson," said Lucy, noticing his presence. "Coffee will be ready in a few minutes." "Good morning, Lucy." Eduardo entered the kitchen, something he rarely did. "This bread smells wonderful." She smiled, and Eduardo realized it was the first time he had seen a genuine smile on her face. Not the respectful courtesy she gave everyone, but something genuine and warm. "It's my grandmother's recipe. She always said that bread made in a hurry never turns out good, that you need to have patience to let the dough rise at the right time. Your grandmother seems to have been a wise woman." "She was. She died when I was 15, but left many lessons." Lucy lowered her eyes, kneading the dough with gentle movements. "She taught me that it doesn't matter the size of our house or how many things we have. What makes a place special is the love we put into it." Eduardo felt something twist in his chest. It had been so long since someone had spoken of love in his presence that the word sounded almost foreign. "And you? Did you always want to work on ranches?" Lucy laughed softly, a musical sound that filled the kitchen. "Actually, my dream was to be a teacher. When I was a child, I used to play school with my dolls. I thought that one day I could teach other children to read and write." She paused, looking out the window where Kyle could be seen studying under the mango tree. "But sometimes dreams need to be put aside to make room for bigger dreams. My dream now is to see Kyle graduate, have a profession, a better life than mine." "You're too young to give up on your own dreams," said Eduardo. Surprising himself with his sincerity, Lucy looked at him attentively, as if she were seeing something in him that she hadn't noticed before. "You're right. Sometimes we forget that we can have more than one dream in life." She paused. "And you? What were your dreams when you were my age?" The question caught Eduardo off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him about dreams? When was the last time he had thought about it himself? He began, but was interrupted by Margaret, entering the kitchen. "Good morning, Dr. Eduardo. Lucy, dear, the bread looks delicious." The moment was broken, but something had changed between them. Eduardo took his coffee cup to the library, but couldn't concentrate on the reports. Lucy's question echoed in his mind like a persistent echo. What were his dreams? That afternoon, Eduardo was reviewing contracts in the office when he heard an argument coming from the courtyard. He got up to see what was happening and saw Kyle running toward the house with tears in his eyes. Lucy came out from inside the house, worried. "Kyle, what happened, my son?" The boy threw himself into his mother's arms, sobbing. "Mom, they expelled me from school." Eduardo felt as if he had been punched. He approached without thinking. "How do you mean expelled? What happened?" Kyle wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself in Eduardo's presence. "There was a presentation today about professions we want to follow. I talked about being a lawyer, about how I want to help people. But after class, some classmates started laughing at me, saying I was just the maid's son, and that I would never be anything in life. The boy's voice trembled with emotion. I tried to ignore it, but then Peter Henderson, he's the son of a car dealership owner, said that people like me shouldn't be in the same school as them. Lucy pressed her son against her chest, her own tears beginning to flow. And then I lost my temper, continued Kyle. I said that being rich didn't make him a better person, that my mother worked honestly while his father sold overpriced cars. Then there was a fight, and the principal decided that I should be expelled for inappropriate behavior and disrespect to a classmate. Eduardo felt a fury he hadn't experienced in years rise like lava in his veins. The injustice of the situation was glaring, a brilliant, hard-working boy being punished for defending his dignity against prejudice. "What's the name of this school?" asked Eduardo, his voice colder than usual. "St. Francis Xavier Academy," replied Lucy. "Mr. Williamson, I understand if you want us to leave. We don't want to bring problems to you." "Problems?" Eduardo looked directly into her green eyes. "Lucy, the only problem here is the injustice that was committed against your son." That night, Eduardo couldn't sleep. He walked through the empty house, thinking about the conversation with Kyle under the mango tree, about the boy's wisdom, about the way his eyes shone when he talked about his studies. He also thought about Lucy, about the dignity with which she faced difficulties, about the unconditional love she dedicated to her son. For the first time in 7 years, Eduardo Williamson felt something beyond pain. He felt purpose. The next day he woke before dawn with a clear idea in mind. He called his personal pilot and then his lawyer. He had decided that some injustices could not go unpunished. While dressing in his best suit, Eduardo looked at himself in the mirror and saw something he hadn't seen in a long time: determination. Kyle had awakened something in him that had been dormant, the capacity to fight for something greater than himself. When he came down for breakfast, he found Lucy in the kitchen, paler than usual. Kyle was sitting at the table, absently playing with his food. "Good morning," said Eduardo. "Kyle, I need you to dress in your best clothes. We're going out." "Going out?" Lucy turned, surprised. "Mr. Williamson, we don't need to bother." "It's not a bother," Eduardo interrupted gently. "It's justice." Lucy looked at him for a long moment, and Eduardo saw something change in her green eyes, a spark of hope that she was trying to suppress so as not to be disappointed. "Where are we going?" asked Kyle. Eduardo smiled, the first genuine smile in years. "We're going to your school. What would you do if you witnessed an injustice like this? Have you ever been through situations where you had to defend your dignity? Leave your comment and don't forget to like if you're enjoying the story." The helicopter cut through the Florida sky on a crystal-clear March morning, carrying 3 passengers who could never have imagined being together in that situation. Eduardo, impeccable in his navy blue suit, observed the landscape below while mentally organizing every word he would say. Beside him, Kyle tried to control his nervousness, his small hands pressed against his knee. Lucy, wearing the only dress suit she owned, a simple but elegant light blue one, looked alternately at her son and at Eduardo, still trying to fully understand what was happening. "I never imagined I'd fly in a helicopter one day," murmured Kyle, breaking the silence. "Neither did I," replied Lucy softly, gently touching her son's arm. "But remember, it doesn't matter where we are or how we got there. What matters is that we maintain our dignity." Eduardo heard the exchange and felt a pang of admiration. Even in an extraordinary situation, Lucy didn't miss the opportunity to teach values to her son. There was a natural elegance in her that transcended clothes or circumstances. It was the elegance of the soul. When the helicopter landed on the football field of St. Francis Xavier Academy, a crowd formed instantly. Students, teachers, and staff ran to the windows and doors, trying to understand what was happening. Eduardo got out first, helped Lucy, and then Kyle, maintaining a serene but determined posture. The school principal, Dr. Americo Silveira, A man in his early 50s, bald with a prominent belly, came running across the courtyard, accompanied by two vice principals and the secretary. His expression mixed surprise, nervousness, and a hint of irritation at having his routine interrupted so spectacularly. Mr. Williamson? The principal stammered, clearly recognizing Eduardo from regional newspapers. To what do we owe? What a surprise! Dr. Americo, Eduardo greeted with professional coldness. I need to talk to you about an urgent matter. Do you prefer it to be here, in front of everyone, or in your office? The principal looked around, noticing that a crowd had formed. Students whispered excitedly, teachers murmured among themselves, and some parents who had come to drop off late children stopped to observe the scene. Let's go to my office, he said quickly. Please follow me. As they walked through the school corridors, Eduardo observed everything around. It was an expensive institution that was evident in the quality of the facilities, the impeccable uniforms of the students, the refined decoration. But there was something in the air, an atmosphere of exclusivity that bordered on arrogance that deeply bothered him. Kyle walked between Eduardo and Lucy, keeping his head high despite his nervousness. Some classmates greeted him timidly, others just observed with curiosity. Eduardo noticed a group of older boys whispering and pointing, and was sure that one of them was the Peter Henderson. The principal's office was a monument to ego. Framed diplomas covered an entire wall, trophies from academic competitions filled a shelf, and behind the desk, a giant photo of the principal greeting the state governor dominated the environment. Please sit down, said Dr. Americo, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. Can I offer coffee? Water? That won't be necessary, replied Eduardo, dryly. Let's get straight to the point. I have here, he took a folder from his jacket's inner pocket, a copy of Kyle Santos's scholarship contract, as well as his academic record from the last 2 years. The principal took the papers with slightly trembling hands, pretending to analyze them, although he clearly already knew what it was about. I see here, continued Eduardo, that Kyle maintains a 9.3 average in all subjects, participated in 3 academic Olympiads representing the school, and never had any disciplinary incidents until the day before yesterday. Well, Mr. Williamson, what happened the day before yesterday was— What happened, Eduardo interrupted, his voice gaining a firmer tone, was that a 13-year-old boy defended his mother's honor against prejudiced comments from a classmate, and for that, he was expelled. Dr. Americo shifted in his chair, sweat beginning to form small drops on his forehead. Mr. Williamson, you need to understand that we maintain here an environment of harmony and mutual respect. When a student verbally attacks a classmate, verbally attacks? Eduardo's voice rose a tone. Dr. Americo, are you telling me that calling a working mother just a maid is not verbal aggression? That saying a child will never be anything in life because of their social origin is not verbal aggression? The silence in the room became dense. Lucy firmly held Kyle's hand, her green eyes fixed on the principal. Eduardo got up from his chair, his imposing presence dominating the environment. Dr. Americo, I'm going to be very clear with you. This school receives public funds through the scholarship program, correct? Yes, and these funds are justified by the commitment to promote social inclusion and educational opportunities for talented low-income youth. Isn't that right? The principal reluctantly nodded, then explained to me how expelling the best scholarship student in the school for defending his dignity aligns with this commitment. Dr. Americo opened and closed his mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Eduardo took advantage of the silence to deliver the final blow. I'm going to make a proposal, Dr. Americo. A proposal that I'm sure the school's board of directors will find very interesting. He opened the folder and took out an official document. I'm offering a donation of $5 million to this institution for the creation of a permanent scholarship fund for low-income youth. The money will be deposited in a specific account, managed by an independent foundation, and will earn enough interest to maintain at least 20 full scholarships per year. The principal's eyes widened. $5 million was more money than the school saw in years of tuition. This offer, continued Eduardo, is conditional on 3 simple requirements. First, Kyle Santos will be immediately reinstated as a student with an official apology from the school. Second, a zero-tolerance program against bullying and social discrimination will be implemented with severe punishments for any form of prejudice. Third, student Peter Henderson will make a public apology to Kyle and participate in a community service program for 6 months. Dr. Americo looked at the document as if it were a winning lottery ticket, but Eduardo wasn't finished yet. If these conditions are not fully accepted, I will withdraw not only my donation offer, but also file a lawsuit for social discrimination and breach of scholarship contract, and I guarantee that the repercussion will be significant. The principal swallowed hard. Eduardo Williamson wasn't just rich, he was one of the most influential men in the state. A lawsuit from him would destroy the school's reputation. I need to consult the board. You have until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to give me an answer, said Eduardo, putting away the papers. We'll be waiting. They got up to leave, but at the door, Eduardo turned once more. Oh, Dr. Americo, one last thing. If at any time Kyle suffers any kind of retaliation or differential treatment because of this situation, I will consider it a breach of agreement, and I protect the people who are important to me. When they left the office, they found a hallway full of curious students. Eduardo walked upright, Lucy maintained her natural dignity, and Kyle, for the first time in days, smiled with confidence. In the helicopter, during the flight back, Lucy finally broke the silence. Mr. Williamson, I don't know how to thank you. No one has ever fought for us like this. Eduardo looked at her, seeing the tears she was trying to contain. Lucy, people like you and Kyle don't need favors. They need opportunity. And sometimes, he paused, looking at the intertwined hands of mother and son, sometimes we fight for others because we forget how to fight for ourselves. Kyle turned to Eduardo, his eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Mr. Williamson, what you did today, it was like watching a superhero in action. Eduardo laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even himself. I'm not a superhero, Kyle. I'm just a man who forgot for a while what really matters in life. As the helicopter approached the ranch, Eduardo looked out the window and saw his property with different eyes. For the first time in 7 years, that place didn't seem just like a refuge from pain. It seemed like a home where good things could happen. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a situation where someone used their position to bring justice? What kind of injustice revolts you the most? Comment your experience and tell us which city you're following our story from. The week that followed the school episode brought a completely new energy to Santa Clara Ranch. Eduardo Williamson woke up on a Thursday with a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Expectation. Not the tense expectation of business or the anxiety that accompanied his obligations, but something lighter, warmer. Dr. Americo called punctually at 9 in the morning, accepting all the imposed conditions. Kyle would be reinstated with honors, Peter Henderson would make his public apologies, and the anti-bullying program would be implemented immediately. The $5 million donation was formalized that same afternoon, with a ceremony that attracted local press and transformed Eduardo involuntarily into a kind of regional hero. But what surprised him most was realizing that his attitude hadn't been motivated by strategy or personal benefit. For the first time in many years, he had acted purely moved by his heart. Kyle returned to classes the following Monday, carrying with him not only his books, but a new confidence. The boy who had always been shy and reserved now walked through the school corridors with his head held high, knowing he had someone who believed in him. Peter Henderson fulfilled his part of the agreement, making public apologies during recess, in front of the entire school, "I want to apologize to Kyle Santos," said the boy into the microphone, clearly embarrassed but sincere. "What I said was prejudiced and wrong. Kyle is one of the best students in our school and deserves our respect regardless of anything." When Kyle told Eduardo about the episode that afternoon, his eyes shone with a mixture of relief and gratitude that deeply touched the man who had become his protector. "You know what impressed me most, Mr. Williamson," said Kyle, sitting in his usual position under the mango tree. "After Peter apologized, several classmates came to talk to me. I discovered that many of them also suffered bullying for different things, some for being too thin, others for wearing glasses, some for not having the most expensive clothes. I think you didn't just save me, you saved a lot of people." Eduardo felt a warmth spreading through his chest. It had been so long since he felt truly useful, since he perceived the positive impact he could have on other people's lives. "The merit is yours, Kyle. You had the courage to defend your principles, even knowing you could suffer consequences." "I learned that from my mother," replied the boy simply. "She always told me that when we're sure we're right, we can't bow our heads." Lucy. Eduardo found himself thinking about her with a frequency that surprised him. There was something in the way she moved through the house, how she cared for the plants, how she talked to the other employees that fascinated him. She had a unique way of transforming simple tasks into small rituals of affection. On Wednesday morning, Eduardo decided to break his rigid routine. Instead of having coffee alone in the library, he went down to the kitchen where Lucy was preparing breakfast. She had her back to him, stirring a pot on the stove, humming softly a song he didn't recognize. "Good morning, Lucy." She turned, and Eduardo noticed there was something different in her green eyes. They seemed brighter, more alive. "Good morning, Mr. Williamson. I'm making oatmeal with cinnamon. My grandmother used to say it's good for the heart." Eduardo smiled, approaching the stove. The aroma rising from the pot was cozy, homey. "Did your grandmother have many medicinal recipes?" "She did. She was born in a time when people healed themselves with what the earth offered. Herbal tea for the liver, chamomile tea to calm, honey with propolis for the throat." Lucy stirred the oatmeal with smooth, almost hypnotic movements. "But she always said that the best medicine was care, that food made with love nourishes more than any vitamin." "And do you believe that?" Lucy stopped stirring the oatmeal and looked at him directly. "I do. I think when we cook for someone, we're offering a little bit of ourselves. That's why our mother's food always has a special taste, isn't it?" Eduardo felt a pang in his chest. It had been so long since anyone had cooked for him with affection that he had forgotten how it felt. "It's been a long time since anyone cooked for me, thinking of me," he said, surprising himself with his honesty. Lucy studied him for a moment, her green eyes full of understanding. "Then that's why you always seem hungry even after eating." The observation hit him like lightning. She had touched something he didn't even know existed, an emotional hunger that no food satisfied. "You're very perceptive, Lucy." "I'm not perceptive. I just know well the feeling of being hungry for things that food can't provide." They remained in silence for a few moments, only the sound of the spoon stirring the oatmeal filling the space between them. Eduardo watched Lucy's profile, the way strands of hair escaped from her bun and framed her face, the gentle concentration in her movements. "Can I ask you a personal question?" he asked. "You can. Do you regret anything in your life?" Lucy stopped again, thoughtful. Then she continued stirring the oatmeal, but Eduardo noticed her breathing had changed. "I regret having believed in promises that were too small for my dreams," she said finally. "When I was younger, I had big dreams. I wanted to study, travel, see the world. But then I met someone who made me believe that love was giving up dreams, that if I really loved, I would make myself small to fit into the life he planned for me." "Kyle's father?" "Yes." Lucy's voice became lower. "He was handsome, charming, knew how to say the right things. He made me feel special for a while. But when he found out I was pregnant, he showed who he really was. He said I should have been more careful, that he wasn't ready to be a father, that I was just an adventure." Eduardo felt a dull anger growing in his chest. How could someone abandon a woman like Lucy and a child like Kyle? I'm sorry. Don't be. That was the best gift he gave me, showing me my own strength. I discovered I could be mother and father at the same time, that I could work and study, that I could raise a wonderful child, even without having a man by my side. She looked at him with a sad but determined smile. Kyle taught me that true love doesn't ask you to diminish yourself. It makes you grow. Eduardo swallowed hard. There was so much wisdom in those words that he felt small before her. And you? Have you ever loved someone who made you grow? The question caught Eduardo off guard. For the first time in a long time, Eduardo thought of Clara not as a loss, but as a memory. Yes, he replied. My wife, Clara, she was like you, made simple things seem special. When she died, I thought I would never feel that sensation of completeness again. And how do you feel now? Eduardo looked at Lucy, really looked. He saw the strength in her green eyes, the delicacy in her movements, the dignity in her posture. He saw a woman who had transformed pain into wisdom, loneliness into independence, difficulties into lessons. Now I feel that maybe I've been waiting for the wrong person to teach me how to live again. The oatmeal was ready, but neither of them moved. They looked at each other in silence, and Eduardo saw something change in Lucy's eyes, a spark of recognition, maybe even hope. Mr. Williamson. Eduardo, call me Eduardo. Eduardo, she repeated, and the name sounded different on her lips. You know I'm just a maid, don't you? That I come from a simple family, that I don't have education, that— Lucy, he interrupted gently, taking a step forward. You know, I'm a man who spent the last 7 years of his life running from feelings, don't you? That I built walls so high I forgot what it's like to be close to someone, that— She laughed softly, a sound he was learning to love. We're quite a pair, aren't we? We are, he agreed. And for the first time in years, Eduardo Williamson allowed himself to feel hope. That afternoon, while watching Lucy caring for the garden, Eduardo realized that something fundamental had changed in him. It wasn't just attraction he felt for her. It was recognition, as if his soul had found something it had been looking for a long time, something he didn't even know was lost. And for the first time since Clara's death, Eduardo allowed himself to imagine a future where he wasn't alone. The month of April arrived at Santa Clara Ranch, bringing with it the first autumn rains and an almost imperceptible change in the house's routine. Eduardo and Lucy had developed a silent intimacy, made of shared glances, conversations that extended beyond necessary, and small gestures of care that neither dared to name. Kyle thrived at school, his grades becoming even better after the reintegration episode. The boy had become a kind of spokesperson for scholarship students, helping to create a study group for those who came from less favored families. Eduardo followed his progress with a paternal pride that surprised him. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that everything changed. Eduardo was in his office, reviewing contracts, when he heard hurried steps in the hallway. Lucy appeared at the door, her face pale and her eyes red. Eduardo, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. He got up immediately, alarmed by her expression. What happened? Did something happen to Kyle? No, he's fine, but— She took a deep breath as if gathering courage. I discovered something. About my father. Eduardo frowned. Lucy had never mentioned her father before. Sit down. Tell me what happened. Lucy sat in the chair in front of his desk, her hands trembling slightly. This morning, when I was organizing your papers in the library, I found a folder that had fallen behind the file cabinet. It was old, with documents from more than 20 years ago. She paused, wiping a tear that insisted on emerging. My father's name was there. Eduardo. John Santos. Eduardo felt his blood freeze in his veins. John Santos. The name he had tried to forget for almost 2 decades. My father worked for your family? Continued Lucy, not noticing the change in Eduardo's expression. He was supervisor of one of your grandfather's ranches, but he was fired unjustly, accused of theft. He never got another job in the region after that. He died a few years later, of heartbreak, my mother always said. The silence that followed was deafening. Eduardo vaguely remembered the story. He had been very young at the time, only 18 years old, but he remembered the whispered conversations, the discussions between his grandfather and his father about an employee who supposedly had stolen cattle. Lucy, did you know? Her voice was low, but loaded with an emotion that Eduardo couldn't decipher. Did you know who I was when you hired me? Eduardo closed his eyes. No, he didn't know. He had no idea that Lucy was John Santos's daughter, but that didn't lessen the weight of the truth she had discovered. No, I didn't know, but I remember your father. Lucy got up, abruptly walking to the window. He was innocent, Eduardo. He always was. My mother told me that at that time, one of the ranch owner's cousins, your cousin, I imagine, was secretly selling cattle and blamed my father to divert suspicion. Eduardo remembered as if it were yesterday. Marcus, his older cousin, had always been problematic. There were rumors that he was involved in shady business, but the family always preferred to turn a blind eye. When cattle started disappearing, it was easier to blame an employee than investigate a family member. My father came home that day destroyed, continued Lucy, tears now flowing freely down her face. It wasn't just the dismissal, it was the humiliation. He was proud of being honest, of working hard. Being accused of being a thief destroyed something inside him. Eduardo got up and walked to her, but Lucy stepped away when he tried to touch her arm. He couldn't get work anywhere else. The news spread. My mother had to sew for other people. To support the house, he started drinking, getting depressed. He died of a stroke 3 years later, but my mother always said he died of a broken heart. Lucy, please let me explain. Explain what? She turned to him, her green eyes blazing with pain and anger. That your family destroyed my father's life because of a lie. That I spent my whole life without knowing why my father died so young and so sad. Eduardo felt as if the ground was opening under his feet. All the connection he had, he built with Lucy, all the affection he felt for her and Kyle, seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. I was very young at the time, he said, knowing it was a weak excuse. I didn't participate in the decision. But you never questioned it, did you? Never wondered if that man was really guilty? Never tried to discover the truth? The accusation hit Eduardo squarely, because it was true. He had never questioned it. He had accepted the family's official version, moved on with his privileged life, without worrying about the fate of the man who had been destroyed. You're right, he admitted, his voice hoarse. I should have questioned, should have investigated, should have done justice. Lucy looked at him for a long moment, and Eduardo saw something break in her eyes. You know what's worse? In recent weeks I started to feel something for you. I started to believe that maybe there could be something between us, despite the differences. She laughed bitterly. What irony, falling in love with a man from a family that destroyed mine. Lucy, please. No, Eduardo, there's no please that fixes this. I can't look at you knowing that my father died because of an injustice your family committed. She walked toward the door, but stopped when Eduardo called her. And Kyle, he needs to continue studying. Don't let what happened between our families in the past affect his future. Lucy turned, and Eduardo saw she was crying again. Kyle will continue studying, but we're leaving the ranch. I can't stay here knowing what I know. Lucy, wait. Give me a chance to fix this, to do justice for your father. There's no justice that brings my father back, Eduardo. There's no money that erases the humiliation he suffered. Some things simply cannot be fixed. She left the office, leaving Eduardo alone with the weight of a truth that changed everything. That night, Eduardo couldn't sleep. He walked through the empty house, thinking about John Santos, about the man who had been destroyed by a lie. He thought about Lucy, about the strength she had shown growing up without a father, about the way she had raised Kyle to be an upright man despite the circumstances. For the first time in 7 years, Eduardo Williamson felt something beyond pain. He felt purpose. The next morning he woke before dawn with a clear idea in mind. He called his personal pilot and then his lawyer. He had decided that some injustices were too big to remain buried. 2 weeks passed since Lucy discovered the truth about her father. 2 weeks of heavy silences, avoided glances, of a distance that hurt more than any words could hurt. Eduardo had hired the best investigators in the country to discover the truth about John Santos, while Lucy packed her few things, preparing to leave the ranch as soon as Kyle finished the semester. Kyle moved between the two worlds with the precocious wisdom of someone who had grown up too fast. He continued studying with dedication, talked to Eduardo about his future plans, but always returned to the room where he found his mother crying softly, thinking no one saw her. Eduardo had become a shadow of himself. For the first time in years, he had learned to feel again, to love again, only to discover that his family's past was an obstacle that seemed insurmountable. But he wouldn't give up. He couldn't give up. It was on a rainy May morning that Dr. Antonio Ferreira, the private investigator Eduardo had hired, arrived at the ranch carrying a thick folder of documents. Eduardo received him in the library, while Lucy, by coincidence, was cleaning the adjacent room. "Dr. Eduardo," said the investigator, a 50-year-old man with graying hair and tired eyes of someone who had seen too much in life. "I managed to gather all the information about the John Santos case, and I can state with certainty he was innocent." Eduardo felt his heart accelerate. Through the half-open door, he saw Lucy stop cleaning and approach, clearly hearing the conversation. "Continue," asked Eduardo. "I found 3 witnesses who at the time were not heard. Ranch employees who saw Marcus Williamson, your cousin, loading cattle during the early hours on several occasions. He had set up an illegal sales scheme with a slaughterhouse in Jacksonville." Dr. Ferreira opened the folder and showed photographs, documents, statements. When the audit discovered the missing cattle, Marcus immediately pointed to John Santos as guilty. He planted false evidence, forged sales receipts, signed with an imitation of John's signature. Eduardo felt nauseous. His own family had destroyed an innocent man to protect a thief. "There's more," continued the investigator. "Your grandfather, Colonel Williamson, had suspicions about Marcus. I found a letter he wrote to a friend, saying that maybe he had committed a terrible injustice and that a good man was destroyed to protect a bad character." "He knew?" Eduardo's voice was barely a whisper. "He knew, yes, but it was too late. John Santos was already dead, and recognizing the error publicly would stain the family name. So he chose silence." Eduardo closed his eyes, feeling the weight of decades of injustice on his shoulders. "Where is Marcus now?" "He died 5 years ago in New York. He never paid for what he did." The silence that followed was broken by a sob. Eduardo turned and saw Lucy at the door, tears streaming down her face. She had heard everything. "My father," she began, but her voice failed. Eduardo got up and walked to her, extending his hands. This time, she didn't pull away. "Lucy, your father was an upright man. He never did anything wrong, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows that." Dr. Ferreira cleared his throat discreetly. "Dr. Eduardo, I prepared a complete report that can be delivered to the press. If you want, we can publish the whole truth in the main newspapers of the state." Eduardo looked at Lucy, seeing the mixture of pain and relief in her green eyes. "Do it. Publish everything, and also prepare a moral damages lawsuit for the Santos family. It won't bring John back, but at least his name will be cleared." Lucy broke down in tears, and this time Eduardo hugged her, feeling the weight of her body against his, the fragility and strength that coexisted in her. "My father was innocent," she repeated between sobs. "He was innocent. He was, yes, and now everyone will know." Dr. Ferreira left discreetly, leaving them alone. Eduardo led Lucy to the sofa, where she collapsed, exhausted. "Lucy, I need to ask for your forgiveness. Not for what I did, because I was very young and didn't know anything, but for what my family did, for what they failed to do. For all the nights your father spent awake, worried, humiliated. For all the years you spent without knowing the truth. Lucy looked at him through tears. Eduardo, this wasn't your fault. You were just a boy. But I'm a man now, and now I can make a difference. They remained in silence for a few minutes, just breathing together, processing the weight of the revelations. "Lucy," said Eduardo finally, "are you still leaving the ranch?" She sighed deeply. "I don't know. Everything has changed. Knowing the truth about my father, it's like a giant weight has been lifted from my shoulders, but at the same time I don't know if I can stay here knowing all this. What if I told you that you're not just a maid to me, that you and Kyle have become the most important thing in my life?" Lucy looked up at him, surprised. "Eduardo, I love you, Lucy. I love you and I love your son as if he were my own son. I know it's complicated. I know there's a lot between us, but I can't let you leave without at least trying." Lucy remained silent for a long time, studying his face. "Are you sure? It's not just gratitude for me having awakened something in you? It's not just pity for the situation?" Eduardo took her hands in his. "Lucy, in recent months you've taught me to live again. You and Kyle brought light to a house that had been dark for 7 years. Yes, I feel guilty about what my family did to yours. Yes, I want to do justice and repair the mistakes of the past. But that doesn't change the fact that I fell in love with you, for the strong woman you are, for the dedicated mother, for the upright person who raised a wonderful son alone." Lucy breathed deeply. "I fell in love with you too," she admitted, "and that scares me, because I don't know if I'll be able to love you without remembering what happened to my father." "Then let's find out together," said Eduardo. "It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. But give me a chance. Give us a chance." At that moment, Kyle appeared at the library door, returning from school. "Mom, is everything okay?" Lucy smiled through tears. "Yes, my son. Everything is okay. We discovered the truth about your grandfather." Kyle dropped his backpack and ran to hug his mother. "So he was really innocent?" "He was," confirmed Eduardo. "And now everyone will know." Kyle turned to Eduardo. "Thank you for everything, for fighting for us, for discovering the truth, for taking care of us." Eduardo hugged the boy, feeling an emotion that didn't fit in his chest. "You're my family now, Kyle, and we take care of family." Lucy watched them, father and son embraced, and felt something heal inside her. Maybe love wasn't about forgetting the past, but about building a future where the past didn't have the power to destroy the present. "Eduardo," she said softly. He turned to her. "I want to try. I want us to try." The smile that lit up Eduardo's face was the most beautiful she had ever seen. 3 months later, John Santos's story was published in all the state newspapers. His innocence was publicly recognized, and an indemnity of $2 million was paid to the family. Lucy donated half the amount to a scholarship fund for needy youth, and kept the rest to guarantee Kyle's education. But the most important thing wasn't the money. It was the peace that finally reached the heart of a family that had suffered too much. Eduardo and Lucy married in a simple ceremony, in the ranch chapel, with Kyle as best man. It wasn't an ending without difficulties. There were malicious comments, whispers about the social difference between them, questions about the reasons for the marriage. But they faced everything together, knowing that true love is the one that grows in adversity. Kyle graduated from high school as the best student in his class and won a full scholarship to study law at the University of Miami. On graduation day, when he went up on stage to receive the Best Student Award, he dedicated the prize to my grandfather, John Santos, an upright man who taught me through my mother that honesty is worth more than any wealth, and to my heart father, Eduardo, who showed me that justice sometimes comes late, but always comes. Eduardo cried that day. He cried for the first time since Clara's death, but they were tears of joy, of pride, of gratitude for having found a reason to live again. Lucy fulfilled her old dream of being a teacher. Eduardo financed her studies, and she graduated in education at 25. She opened a school on the ranch for children of rural workers in the region, giving opportunity to children who, like Kyle, had intelligence and determination, but didn't have resources. The John Santos School, as it was named, became a reference in rural education in the state of Florida. Lucy woke up every day with the smile of someone who had found their purpose, and Eduardo watched her with the admiration of someone who had learned that true love is not just about receiving, but about supporting the dreams of those we love. On Sunday afternoons, the family gathered under the same mango tree where Eduardo had first met Kyle. Now they weren't just three, two little twin sisters, Clara and Hope, completed the family, girls with green eyes like their mother and determined personality like their adoptive father. "Dad," said Kyle on one of those afternoons, now 18 years old and about to leave for Miami, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, son. Do you believe in destiny?" Eduardo looked at Lucy, who was rocking one of the twins, and then at the other girl who was playing on the grass. "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes I think everything that happened, the injustice, with my grandfather, our arrival here, even discovering the truth, everything was to bring us to each other, as if the universe had a bigger plan." Eduardo smiled, observing his family. Lucy had taught her daughters the same song she used to hum in the kitchen years ago. The soft sound filled the afternoon with a peace he had never imagined possible. "You know, Kyle, I don't know if I believe in destiny, but I believe that sometimes the right people come into our lives at the moment we need them most, and that love has the power to heal wounds we thought would never heal." Lucy approached, sitting beside Eduardo on the bench. "And I believe," she said, "that my father would be proud to see what we built, that his death wasn't in vain if it brought justice and love to our family." Eduardo put his arm around his wife's shoulders, pulling her close. "Your grandmother was right about plants needing rain," he said to Kyle. "Sometimes we need to go through the storm to discover how strong we are, and sometimes it's in the darkness that we find our greatest light." When the stars began to appear in the Florida sky, the family went inside. Eduardo was the last to leave the garden, stopping to look one last time at the mango tree where it all began. There, where a wounded man had found reason to live again, where a courageous woman had discovered she could trust love again, where a determined boy had become the bridge between two worlds, proving that goodness always finds its way. Eduardo Williamson had learned that there is no love without risk, that there is no growing without pain, and that there is no happy ending without the courage to start over. He had learned that the heart can die and be reborn as many times as necessary, as long as it finds people worth it. And as he walked back to the house where his family was waiting for him, Eduardo whispered a prayer of gratitude, not only for the blessings he had received, but for the losses that had prepared him to recognize them. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters. And sometimes you have to have your heart broken so it can open to an even greater love. At Santa Clara Ranch, where the roots of the heart had grown deep and strong, a new love story was written every day, not in grand gestures, but in small moments of care, in shared glances, in intertwined hands, while watching their daughters grow. And Eduardo knew that Clara, wherever she was, would approve of the man he had become, would approve of the family he had found, would approve of the love he had learned to give again, because true love doesn't feel jealousy of the past, it celebrates the future. And so we come to the end of this journey of pain, justice, and rebirth. A story that reminds us that true love is not the one that doesn't face obstacles, but the one that finds strength to overcome them together. If you were moved by the story of Eduardo, Lucy, and Kyle, leave your like and comment which city you're following from. Your participation is very important to us. What other stories of overcoming and love would you like to see? Share your ideas in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart and remind us that there is always hope, even in the most difficult moments. Until the next story. Epilogue. Seeds for Tomorrow. 5 years passed since that afternoon under the mango tree, and Santa Clara Ranch had transformed into something neither Eduardo nor Lucy could have imagined. What began as a refuge for a widowed man's pain had become a symbol of hope and social transformation throughout the region. The John Santos School now served more than 200 children, daughters of rural workers from 5 neighboring counties. Lucy, now 30, had become a respected educator throughout the state of Florida. Her teaching method, which combined academic rigor with valuing the rural origins of students, had been adopted by other schools in the region. Eduardo, at 47, had discovered that true wealth wasn't just in accumulating goods, but in multiplying opportunities. Besides the school, he had created a microcredit program for small rural producers, a technical course in sustainable agriculture, and a social investment fund that supported young entrepreneurs from the interior. Kyle, now 23, was in his 4th year of law at the University of Miami. He had specialized in agricultural law and human rights, and was already interning at a firm that defended rural workers. Every weekend he returned home, bringing with him stories from the big city, but always with the same humility and determination that had characterized him since he was a boy. The twins, Clara and Hope, now 5 years old, were the joy of the house. Clara had inherited Eduardo's blue eyes and her mother's determined personality, while Hope had Lucy's green eyes and the adoptive father's contemplative gentleness. Both already knew how to read and write, educated by their own mother, with the same dedication that had once been given to Kyle. It was on a September morning, when the trees were beginning to bloom, announcing the arrival of spring, that Eduardo received a call that would change the course of their lives again. Dr. Eduardo. The voice on the other end of the line was from Dr. Marcus Pereira, rector of the University of Florida. "We have a proposal to make to you and your wife." Eduardo was in the office, reviewing the school's monthly reports when he answered the call. Lucy entered the room at that moment, carrying a glass of fresh mango juice, a habit she had developed of taking care of him in small details. "I'm listening, Dr. Marcus. We wanted to invite you for an unprecedented partnership. The university is creating a master's program in rural education and social development. We would like the John Santos School to be our laboratory school, and for Lucy to coordinate the program, together with our teachers." Eduardo looked at Lucy, who had sat in the chair next to his desk. Her green eyes shone with a mixture of surprise and interest. "Would this mean Lucy would have to do a master's degree?" "Yes, but we offer a full scholarship, and classes would be adapted so she could balance with her work at the school. The program would be a pioneer in the United States, and we believe you two are the right people to lead it." Lucy got up and walked to the window, observing the children playing in the school courtyard. Eduardo knew that look. It was the same one she had when evaluating an important decision. "Dr. Marcus, can I talk to my wife and give you an answer tomorrow?" "Of course, but I must say that your reputation has reached Washington. The Department of Education is interested in transforming the pilot project into a national program." When Eduardo hung up the phone, Lucy was still at the window, lost in thought. "Are you afraid?" he asked, getting up and walking to her. "It's not fear, it's responsibility. If we accept this, it won't just be about our school or our family. It will be about thousands of children throughout the entire United States." Eduardo put his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "And do you think you're not ready?" Lucy laughed softly, relaxing in his arms. "Do you remember when I was just a 20-year-old maid, with a 13-year-old son and no prospect beyond working to support our family? I remember, and I also remember a woman who had dreams kept in her heart, waiting for the right opportunity to flourish. Sometimes I can't believe everything that happened. I have a school. I'm married to a wonderful man. I have beautiful daughters. And now," she paused, "now I can help change education in the entire country." Eduardo made her turn in his arms, looking directly into her eyes. "Do you know what my favorite part in this whole story is?" "What?" It's knowing that none of this happened by chance. Every difficulty you faced, every obstacle you overcame, every tear you shed prepared you for this moment. You're not just a woman who got lucky. You're a woman who built her own luck. Lucy touched his face with her hands, feeling the wrinkles that had formed around his blue eyes, not wrinkles of worry, but of smiles and laughter. And you? Won't you miss our simple routine? The quiet mornings, the family breakfasts, the Sundays under the mango tree? Lucy, our simple routine will continue. The quiet mornings will continue. The family breakfasts will continue. The difference is that now we're going to share our happiness with even more people. That afternoon, they gathered the whole family on the house porch to talk about the proposal. Kyle had arrived from Miami the day before for a weekend visit. The twins were playing with their dolls on the rug while the adults talked. "Mom, this is incredible," said Kyle after hearing about the university's proposal. "Remember when you told me your dream was to be a teacher? Now you're going to train teachers? But it means I'll have to study a lot, travel to conferences, be away from you sometimes." "Mom," Clara interrupted, looking up from her dolls, "you always said we should follow our dreams. This is your dream, isn't it?" The simplicity of the question left everyone silent. Lucy looked at her 5-year-old daughter, impressed with her maturity. "Yes, my love, this is my dream." "Then you have to go after it," said Hope, joining her sister, "like Kyle went after his dream of being a lawyer." Eduardo smiled, observing his daughters. They had inherited not only physical characteristics, but also their mother's wisdom and determination. "It's decided then," he said. "We're going to accept the proposal." Lucy breathed deeply, feeling a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "Are you sure? Even knowing that our life is going to change completely?" Eduardo got up and extended his hand to her. "Lucy, 8 years ago, when you arrived here, I was a man, dead inside. You taught me to live again. Now it's my turn to support you so you can fly even higher." 2 years later, Dr. Lucy Santos Williamson defended her master's dissertation on rural education as a tool for social transformation. The auditorium at the University of Florida was packed. Eduardo was in the front row with the twins, now 7 years old, one on each side. Kyle, already graduated and working as a lawyer in Tampa, was beside his father with a proud smile. "Education," said Lucy in her presentation, "is not just about teaching content. It's about teaching children to dream, to believe in their capabilities, to transform their realities. Every child we educate today is a future we are building." When she finished the presentation, the examining board approved her with distinction. Eduardo stood up to applaud, followed by the entire audience. But what moved him most was seeing the tears of pride in his daughter's eyes. "Is Mommy a doctor now?" asked Clara. "Master," corrected Kyle, laughing. "But doctor, she already was a long time ago. Doctor in taking care of people." The rural education program, coordinated by Lucy, became a national reference. Teachers from across the country came to Santa Clara Ranch to learn about the methodology of the John Santos School. Lucy wrote 3 books on rural education, all bestsellers in the academic field. Eduardo accompanied everything with the pride of someone who sees the loved one fulfilling their most ambitious dreams. But he never stopped being the man who prepared breakfast for the family on Sundays, who helped the daughters with homework, who reserved Friday nights for conversations alone with Lucy. Kyle specialized in environmental law and returned to Florida to open a firm that defended small rural producers. He married Marina, an agricultural engineer he met during one of the conferences organized by Lucy. The couple lived in a house built on the ranch property, just 100 meters from the main house. The twins grew up in an atmosphere of love and intellectual stimulation. Clara showed talent for mathematics and dreamed of being an engineer, while Hope had artistic vocation and wanted to be a writer. Both were fluent in English and Spanish, as well as Portuguese, and had already visited several countries accompanying their parents to conferences and lectures. On a March afternoon, 10 years after Lucy and Kyle's arrival, at the ranch, Eduardo was sitting under the same mango tree where it all began. Now, however, he wasn't alone. Lucy was beside him, grading tests from her master's students. The twins were playing in the garden, and Kyle was pushing a baby carriage, his first child, a boy who had been baptized John in honor of his great-grandfather. "You know what I was thinking about?" said Eduardo, interrupting Lucy's concentrated silence. "What?" "About how funny life is. 10 years ago I thought I had lost everything. Today I look around and see that actually I hadn't lost anything. I was just waiting for the right family to share all this with." Lucy smiled, closing the test booklet. "And I was thinking about how proud my father would be to see what we built. Not just for the justice that was done, but for everything that was born from that injustice." Eduardo took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Sometimes I think your father and my Clara are somewhere, watching all this and smiling, as if they had conspired to bring us to each other. Do you think it's possible that the people we love continue taking care of us even after they're gone?" Eduardo looked at his grandson, who was sleeping peacefully in Kyle's arms, and then at his daughters, who were running through the garden with the infinite energy of childhood. "I think love is the only thing that really doesn't die. It transforms, multiplies, finds new hearts to inhabit. Your father lives in the character you passed to Kyle, and that Kyle is passing to his son. My Clara lives in the love I learned to give to you and our daughters." Lucy nestled on Eduardo's shoulder, observing her family. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For having taught me that it's possible to start over. For having shown me that love is not about forgetting the past, but about building a future where the past makes sense." Eduardo kissed the top of her head, smelling the herbal shampoo scent she always used. "Thank you for having taught me to live again, for having brought color to a life that was in black and white." When the sun began to set over the lands of Santa Clara Ranch, painting the sky in golden and pink tones, Eduardo Williamson got up and extended his hand to Lucy. "Shall we go home?" She smiled, accepting his hand. "Let's go." And as they walked back to the house, followed by their daughters, son, grandson, and daughter-in-law, Eduardo knew he had found something more precious than all the gold in the world, a family united by true love, by mutual respect, by generosity, and by the hope that the future can always be better than the past. At Santa Clara Ranch, where the roots of the heart had grown deep and strong, a new generation began to flourish, carrying with them the values of dignity, justice, and love that had transformed pain into hope and hope into reality. And under the centennial mango tree, silent witness to so many stories of love and overcoming, the wind blew softly, carrying with it the promise that some stories never end. They just transform into legends of love that inspire other stories, other loves, other new beginnings. And so we come to the end of this journey of pain, justice, and rebirth, a story that reminds us that true love is not the one that doesn't face obstacles, but the one that finds strength to overcome them together. If you were moved by the story of Eduardo, Lucy, and Kyle, leave your like and comment which city you're following from. Your participation is very important to us. What other stories of overcoming and love would you like to see? Share your ideas in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart and remind us that there is always hope, even in the most difficult moments. Until the next story, the legacy that remains. 15 years passed since Lucy and Kyle arrived at Santa Clara Ranch on that rainy March morning. What began as a simple hiring of a housemaid had transformed into the greatest story of love and social transformation the region had ever witnessed. Eduardo, now 57 years old, had become a legendary figure in American agribusiness, not only for his business successes, but mainly for the way he had revolutionized the concept of social responsibility in the field. His hair, now completely gray, and the expression lines around his blue eyes told the story of a man who had learned to live fully. Santa Clara Ranch was no longer just a rural property. It had become an educational and social complex that included the John Santos School, the Rural Teacher Training Center, a veterinary hospital that served small producers free of charge, and the Eduardo and Lucy Williamson Institute, a foundation that supported rural education projects throughout the United States. Lucy, now Dr. Lucy Santos Williamson, had completed her doctorate in education and become one of the country's greatest specialists in rural education. Her books were studied in universities across the United States, and she received invitations to lecture in various countries. At 40, she still maintained the same natural elegance and the same silent strength that had conquered Eduardo years ago. But now her green eyes shone with the confidence of someone who had found their place in the world. Kyle, now 28 years old, had become one of the state's most respected lawyers. His office in Tampa exclusively defended rural workers and small producers, often without charging fees from those who couldn't pay. He had been married to Marina for 5 years, and the couple had 3 children. John, 8 years old, Michael, 5, and little Anna Clara, 2 years old. The twins, Clara and Hope, now 15 years old, were brilliant and determined young women. Clara had developed a passion for sustainable engineering and already participated in math and science Olympiads, dreaming of creating technologies that would help small rural producers. Hope had discovered her talent for writing and had already published 2 children's books, with all income donated to literacy programs. It was on a sunny October morning that news arrived at the ranch, bringing an emotion no one expected. Eduardo was in the office when his secretary knocked on the door. "Dr. Eduardo, there's a call from Washington. It's from the White House." Eduardo frowned. Calls from the federal government weren't uncommon. He was frequently consulted about rural development policies, but there was something in the secretary's tone that suggested this one was special. "Mr. Williamson?" The voice on the other end was formal but warm. "This is Regina Santos, Special Advisor to the President of the United States. I have the pleasure of informing you that you and your wife have been selected to receive the Order of Educational Merit, the country's highest decoration in the area of education." Eduardo felt his heart accelerate. I don't know what to say. "The ceremony will be next week at the White House. The President would like to personally meet the work you develop, and there's an additional surprise. The John Santos School has been chosen as a model for a new national rural education program." When Eduardo hung up the phone, he sat in silence for several minutes, processing the information. Then he got up and went to look for Lucy, who was teaching a class for teachers in training. He waited at the classroom door until she finished explaining literacy methods for rural children. When the students left for break, Eduardo entered and closed the door behind him. "I need to tell you something," he said, barely able to contain the emotion in his voice. Lucy looked at him, immediately worried. "What happened? Did something happen?" Eduardo held her hands in his. "We're going to receive the Order of Educational Merit in Washington next week." Lucy's eyes widened, unable to fully process the information. "The Order of Merit? And that's the country's highest decoration in the area of education," completed Eduardo. "And more, our school is going to be a model for a national program." Lucy sat in one of the classroom desks, her legs suddenly weak. "Eduardo, are you sure? It can't be a mistake." He knelt in front of her, looking directly into her green eyes. "It's not a mistake, my love. It's the recognition of everything you built, of all the years of dedication, of all the nights you spent studying, of all the children you transformed." Lucy began to cry, not from sadness, but from an emotion so intense it didn't fit in her chest. "My father, if my father could see this—" "He's seeing," said Eduardo softly. "I'm sure he's seeing and being immensely proud of the daughter he raised." The news spread quickly through the ranch and the region. The small town of Clearwater, where Lucy had been born, declared a municipal holiday on the day of the ceremony in Washington. The John Santos School was decorated with banners and posters made by the students themselves. Kyle arrived at the ranch that same afternoon, bringing Marina and the 3 children. When he saw his parents, he hugged both with an emotion that reminded them of the 13-year-old boy he had been. "Mom, Dad, you deserve this and much more," he said, tears flowing freely down his face. "You changed the lives of thousands of people. You changed my life. You changed my children's lives. You changed the entire future of this region." The twins came running from school when they heard the news, hugging their parents with the spontaneity of adolescence. "Mommy, Daddy, are we going to be on television?" asked Clara, excited. "The important thing isn't being on television," said Hope, always the more reflective of the two. "The important thing is that now everyone will know about the work you do." The night before the trip to Washington, the whole family gathered on the house porch for a special dinner. Mrs. Margaret, now 75 years old, had prepared all the family's favorite dishes. The table was set with the fine china that was rarely used, and candles illuminated the environment with a golden and welcoming light. Eduardo stood up to make a toast, holding a wineglass in one hand and Lucy's hand in the other. 15 years ago," he began, his voice choked with emotion, "I was a man lost in his own pain, unable to see beyond his own sadness. Today, I look around this table and see proof that love has the power to transform not only individuals, but entire families, entire communities." He looked at each face around the table. Lucy, with her green eyes shining with happiness. Kyle, now a grown man, but still with the same determined look of the boy he had met. Marina, who had become a daughter to him. The grandchildren who represented the family's future. The twins, his princesses, who had grown up in an atmosphere of love and infinite possibilities. "This award isn't mine or Lucy's," continued Eduardo. "It belongs to all of us. It belongs to Kyle, who taught us that dignity has no age. It belongs to Marina, who brought even more love to our family. It belongs to the girls, who remind us every day to keep our dreams alive. It belongs to our grandchildren, who represent the next generation of world transformers." Lucy stood up beside her husband, too emotional to speak initially. Then, with a trembling but firm voice, she said, "When I arrived here 15 years ago, I was a scared young woman with a son to raise and no prospect beyond working hard to survive. Never, not even in my most ambitious dreams, did I imagine I could have a life like this." She paused, looking at her own hands, no longer the calloused hands of a housemaid, but the cared-for hands of a professionally accomplished woman, but which still maintained the strength from those difficult times. "But what moves me most aren't the awards or recognition. It's knowing that we managed to build a family, where love is stronger than any difficulty, where dreams are encouraged, and where each of us strives to make the world a little better." Kyle stood up, holding his own glass. "I want to make a special toast," he said, "to my grandfather John Santos, who, even though wrongly accused, raised an upright daughter who knew how to transform pain into strength, and to Father Eduardo, who taught me that being a man means fighting for those we love and protecting those who are most vulnerable." The children, even the youngest ones, seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment. John, the oldest grandson, asked to speak. "Grandpa Eduardo, Grandma Lucy, thank you for building a family where we can dream big," said the 8-year-old boy, with a maturity that greatly resembled his father at the same age. The ceremony in Washington was broadcast live on national television. Eduardo and Lucy went up to the White House stage, dressed in their best clothes, but carrying in their hearts the simplicity and dignity that had always characterized them. The President of the United States, when presenting the medals, said words that were engraved in the memory of all those present. "Eduardo and Lucy Williamson represent the best of America. They show us that true greatness is not in accumulating wealth, but in multiplying opportunities. It's not in being served, but in serving. It's not in receiving love, but in spreading love." When they returned to the ranch, they found a surprise party organized by the entire community. Hundreds of people were gathered in the courtyard of the John Santos School. Current and former students, teachers, ranch employees, regional residents, local authorities. A giant banner read, "Thank you for teaching us that dreams come true when we have the courage to pursue them." Lucy cried when she saw so many familiar faces, so many lives that had been touched by the work she and Eduardo had developed over the years. There were doctors who had studied at the John Santos School as children, teachers who had been trained by her, entrepreneurs who had started their careers with microcredit from the foundation. "Speech! Speech!" they began to shout. Eduardo climbed onto a small, improvised platform, helping Lucy climb up too. "My friends," he began, his voice echoing through the silent courtyard, "what you're seeing here today is not the story of two people who got lucky. It's proof that when we unite love, work, and determination, we can transform any reality." He paused, looking at the attentive faces in the crowd. 15 years ago, I received a young mother and her son in my house. I thought I was offering work. Actually, they offered me a new life. I thought I was giving opportunity. Actually, they gave me purpose. Lucy approached the microphone. "I want to say something to all the mothers who are here, especially those who are going through difficulties," she said, her voice loaded with emotion. "Never give up on your dreams. Never accept that someone tells you that you're not capable. Never settle for less than you deserve, because if I could do it, you can too." The crowd exploded in applause that lasted several minutes. That night, after everyone had left and the house returned to silence, Eduardo and Lucy walked to the mango tree where it all began. Now, 15 years later, the tree had grown even more, its branches offering generous shade that sheltered a stone bench that Eduardo had ordered built. "Do you remember the first time we talked here?" asked Eduardo, sitting beside Lucy on the bench. "I remember. You were so sad, so lost. And Kyle asked you that question about why you always seem sad. And do you remember what he said about plants needing rain to grow?" Lucy smiled, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. "I remember. He was right. Sometimes we need the storm to discover our own strength." They remained in silence for a few minutes, just listening to the sounds of the night. In the countryside, crickets singing, wind moving the leaves, the distant lowing of cattle. "Eduardo," said Lucy finally, "do you think we made a difference?" He laughed softly. "Lucy, we have a school that has already graduated more than 1,000 children. We have an education program that's going to be implemented throughout the country. We have children and grandchildren who are growing up with solid values. We have an entire community that has been transformed." He paused, taking her hand. "But do you know what difference I'm most proud of?" "Which one?" "The difference we made in each other. You taught me to love again. I helped you discover your potential. Together, we built a family where love is stronger than any adversity." Lucy turned to look at him, her green eyes reflecting the moonlight. 15 years later, you still make me feel like I'm the most special woman in the world. Because you are, and always will be." They kissed under the centennial mango tree. Two hearts that had found in each other not only love, but the purpose of their lives. When they returned home, they found a note from the twins on the kitchen table. "Daddy and Mommy, you are our heroes. Thank you for teaching us that love can move mountains and that dreams are always possible when we have people who believe in us. With love, Clara and Hope." Eduardo carefully folded the note and kept it in his wallet, next to a photo of the whole family. The next morning, the ranch's routine returned to normal. Eduardo woke up early to check the cattle. Lucy prepared breakfast humming as she always did. The twins got ready to go to school, and Kyle arrived with the children to spend the weekend. But there was something different in the air, a sense of completeness, of a closed circle, of a well-told story. Santa Clara Ranch had become more than a rural property. It had become a symbol that true love not only transforms individual lives, but has the power to transform entire generations. And under the centennial mango tree, where it all began with a boy's question about sadness, flowers that Lucy had planted now grew, flowers that bloomed every year, reminding everyone that from the deepest pain can be born the most genuine joy. If you were moved by the story of Eduardo, Lucy and Kyle, leave your like and comment which city you're following from. Your participation is very important to us. What other stories of overcoming and love would you like to see? Share your ideas in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart, and remind us that there is always hope, even in the most difficult moments. Until the next story.